Princess Velith Soranis stood before the tall mirror in her chambers, watching her silver skin catch the light. The bioluminescent markings along her arms pulsed a deep blue, the color of dread. She could not hide her emotions, no matter how hard she tried. Her people's biology betrayed every feeling. Today, she would meet her husband, a human. The thought made her stomach turn. She had grown up hearing stories about humans, violent creatures, short-lived beasts who bred like insects and fought like cornered animals. When the Sorani Empire first discovered their little planet, the generals had laughed. Conquering them would take 3 months, they said, maybe 4. That was 12 years ago. Millions of Sorani soldiers had died since then. The Empire's resources were bleeding away. Their allied species were questioning the war. And somehow, impossibly, the humans were winning. So now there would be peace, and peace required a symbol, a marriage between a Sorani royal and a human. Someone had to sacrifice themselves for the good of the Empire. Velith had volunteered. Her mother, Empress Ilara, had begged her to reconsider. Her brother Vorath had called her a fool. But Velith understood politics. If she did not volunteer, some younger princess would be forced into this fate. At least Velith was strong enough to endure it. She imagined her future husband. Young, probably. Aggressive, certainly. Humans valued physical strength and dominance. They would send their finest warrior, some muscled brute who would expect her to submit. She had already planned how to manage him. She would be cold and distant. She would fulfill her duties and nothing more. She would never, ever let him touch her heart. A soft chime announced a visitor. Her attendant, a small Lorath female with 4 arms, entered with a bow. "Your Highness, the human delegation has arrived. Your presence is requested in the ceremonial hall." Velith straightened her spine. Her markings shifted to pale white, the color of composure, carefully controlled. "I am ready." She was not ready. The walk to the ceremonial hall felt endless. Sorani nobles lined the corridors, watching her pass. Some looked at her with pity. Others with barely hidden disgust. She was lowering herself to marry an animal, their eyes said. She was tainting the royal bloodline. Velith kept her gaze forward and her markings white. The ceremonial hall was vast, built to impress visiting species with Sorani power. Today, it held only a small group. Her mother on the throne, her brother standing beside her, a handful of advisors, and 3 humans near the center of the room. Velith's eyes found the humans immediately. 2 were clearly guards, tall, armored, hands near their weapons. But the third... She stopped walking. He was not what she expected. The man was older, middle-aged by human standards, perhaps 40 or 45. His hair was more gray than black, cut short and practical. He wore simple, formal clothing, nothing military, nothing impressive. His face was weathered, lined with years and something else, something heavier. He was not tall, he was not muscled. He looked like someone's quiet uncle, not a warrior. When he saw her, he bowed. Not a small nod of acknowledgement, a full, respectful bow, the kind her own people used for honored elders. "Princess Velith Soranis," he said. His voice was soft, calm. He spoke her language with a slight accent, but the words were correct. "I am Kang Do-hyun. I am honored to meet you." Velith did not know what to say. Her markings flickered yellow, confusion, before she forced them back to white. "You speak our language," she finally said. "I have been learning for 6 months." He straightened from his bow. "I did not want to rely on translators for something so important." 6 months. He had spent 6 months learning Sorani for her. Her brother Vorath stepped forward, looking down at the human with obvious contempt. "This is what humanity sends? An old man?" Do-hyun met the prince's gaze without flinching. "I volunteered, Your Highness." "Volunteered?" Vorath laughed. No one volunteers for this duty. What crime did you commit to be punished with this assignment? The human was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice remained gentle. No crime. But I am a widower with no children. I have lived my life. Somewhere on Earth there was a young soldier with a family waiting for him. A wife, children, a future. I could not let him be sent here instead. Veleth felt something shift in her chest. She did not understand it. So you sacrificed yourself, she said slowly. Do-hyun looked at her. His eyes were dark brown, warm despite the sadness in them. Someone had to, princess. Better me than someone who still has everything to lose. The ceremony began. It was brief and formal. Signatures on documents, exchange of ceremonial items, words spoken in ancient Sorani that Do-hyun clearly did not fully understand, but repeated carefully anyway. At one point, tradition required them to share a ceremonial cup. The cup was heavy, made of carved crystal, difficult to hold with one hand. Veleth fumbled with it slightly. Her nerves were worse than she had realized. Do-hyun's hands came up immediately, not grabbing, not taking control, just steadying. His fingers were rough with old scars, but his touch was impossibly gentle. He helped her raise the cup, then released it the moment she had her balance. "Thank you," she whispered, surprising herself. He simply nodded. When the ceremony ended, they were married. Husband and wife, bound by treaty and politics, not love. Her mother descended from the throne to speak with the human delegation about logistics. Vorath disappeared, likely to complain to his allies about the embarrassment of the day. The guards and attendants began preparing for the journey to Veleth's homeworld. Veleth found herself standing alone with her new husband. "You are not what I expected," she admitted. Do-hyun's weathered face shifted into something that might have been a smile. "I suspect I am a disappointment. Your people likely wanted someone more impressive." "I expected a beast," Veleth said honestly. "A violent warrior who would try to dominate me. I am sorry to disappoint you." There was gentle humor in his voice. "I am afraid I am just a tired old man who likes gardening and reading. I will try not to be too much trouble." Veleth studied him. Her markings had shifted without her permission, soft green now, the color of curiosity. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you really volunteer? The true reason?" Do-hyun was quiet for a long moment. He looked at his scarred hands, then back at her. "Because I have caused enough pain in my life," he said softly. "I hoped that maybe, at the end, I could do something that heals instead of hurts." He bowed again and walked toward the human guards, leaving Veleth standing alone with her thoughts. Her markings shifted through colors she could not control: green, yellow, soft blue. Confusion, curiosity, and something else she could not name. This man was not a beast. So what was he? Veleth and Do-hyun lived in her palace on the Sorani homeworld, but they might as well have been on different planets. She had given him the East Wing, comfortable rooms far from her own chambers. He had accepted without complaint. They saw each other at formal dinners when politics required it. They exchanged polite words when they passed in hallways. Otherwise, they lived separate lives. Veleth told herself this was proper. This was a political marriage, not a real one. She owed him nothing beyond basic courtesy. But she found herself watching him. It started by accident. Her balcony overlooked the eastern gardens, and Do-hyun had claimed a small corner of them for himself. Every morning she would see him there, kneeling in the dirt, planting things, gardening. On a world that was not his own, surrounded by people who hated his species, this human spent his mornings growing flowers. Veleth did not understand it. She began finding excuses to observe him. Morning tea on her balcony, evening walks that happened to pass by the gardens. She watched him work with quiet patience, his scarred hands gentle with the seedlings. He never seemed to notice her watching. Or perhaps he did, and simply chose not to react. Other things caught her attention, too. Do-hyun spent hours in the palace library, reading Sorani literature and history. He asked the servants questions about their culture. Genuine questions, not the condescending curiosity of a conqueror learning about the conquered. When he did not understand something, he admitted it openly and asked for explanation. The servants did not know what to make of him. Neither did the nobles. At formal events, Sorani lords and ladies mocked Do-hyun openly. They commented on his age, his appearance, his species. They called him the princess's pet, loud enough for him to hear. Do-hyun never reacted with anger. He smiled politely, deflected with gentle humor, and changed the subject. When one particularly cruel lord suggested that humans were only good for manual labor, Do-hyun had simply nodded and said, "You may be right. I have always preferred working with my hands." The lord had not known how to respond. Velith watched these encounters with growing confusion. Where was the human rage? Where was the famous violence of his species? This man absorbed insults like water into sand. One night, she could not sleep. Her mind was too full of questions. She left her chambers and walked through the quiet palace, eventually finding herself near the Eastern Gardens. Do-hyun was there. He sat on a stone bench staring at the moons. His shoulders were tense, his breathing uneven. Even from a distance, Velith could see that something was wrong. She should have left. Instead, she walked closer. "You could not sleep either," she said. Do-hyun looked up, startled. For just a moment, she saw something raw in his eyes, pain, old and deep. Then he composed himself. "I apologize, Princess. I did not mean to disturb your gardens." "They are your gardens, too." She surprised herself by sitting on the bench beside him. "You planted half of these flowers yourself." He was quiet. The moons cast silver light across his weathered face. "Do you have nightmares?" Velith asked. The question hung in the air. Do-hyun did not answer for a long moment. "Sometimes," he finally said. "The war gave me many things to dream about." "You fought in the war." "Yes." "You killed my people." "Yes." He did not look away from her. His voice was heavy with something. Not pride, not shame, something more complicated. "And your people killed mine, including my wife." Velith felt her markings shift to gray, the color of grief. "I did not know." It was early in the war, an orbital strike on a civilian city. She was a teacher. She was helping children evacuate when the building collapsed. Do-hyun's voice remained calm, but his hands had tightened into fists. "I found out 3 days later when my unit emerged from deep cover operations." "Do you hate us?" Velith asked. "For what happened to her?" Do-hyun unclenched his hands slowly. He looked at her with those dark, sad eyes. "I did, for a while. Hatred was easier than grief." He shook his head. "But hatred is a fire that burns everything, including yourself. I watched good soldiers become monsters because they let hatred consume them. I did not want to become that." "So you stopped hating us?" "I learned to separate the people from the war." He gestured at the gardens around them. "Your people did not kill my wife. War killed her. Fear and politics and the terrible momentum of violence, those things killed her, hating an entire species for the actions of generals and soldiers. That path leads nowhere good." Velith did not know what to say. Her people would never think this way. Sorani held grudges for generations. Blood debts were sacred. "You are strange," she said finally. Do-hyun's weathered face cracked into a small smile. "So I have been told." They sat in silence for a while, watching the moons move across the sky. Velith felt something shifting between them, Not friendship exactly, but something less hostile than before. "Why gardening?" she asked eventually. "Because it is slow," Do-hyun said. "Patient. You plant a seed and wait. You nurture it through seasons. You cannot rush growth." He touched a flowering bush nearby. "After so many years of destruction, I needed to create something, to remind myself that building is possible." Velith looked at the gardens with new eyes. These were not just plants. They were a quiet rebellion against everything war had taken from this man. "I read your military record," she admitted. "Parts of it at least. Most was classified." Do-hyun went very still. "The records called you the Ghost of Proxima. They said you were responsible for operations that changed the course of the war." "Records exaggerate." "Do they?" Velith turned to face him fully. "What were you, Do-hyun, before you were my husband?" He was quiet for a long time. The moons continued their slow journey across the sky. "I was a weapon," he said softly. "A very effective one. I did things that won battles and broke enemy lines and saved human lives." He paused. "I also did things that keep me awake at night. Things I will never forget and never forgive myself for." "You do not seem like a weapon." "No." Do-hyun looked at his scarred hands. "That is because I spent 10 years learning to be something else, something better." He met her eyes. "I volunteered for this marriage because I hoped it was finally my chance to build instead of destroy, to heal instead of hurt." Velith felt her markings shift through colors: gray, green, soft gold, grief, curiosity, and something warmer she could not name. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "we should have dinner together tomorrow, without the formal politics, just conversation." Do-hyun's eyes widened slightly. Then that small, genuine smile returned. "I would like that very much, Princess." "Velith," she corrected. "If we are to have dinner together, you should use my name." "Velith," he repeated softly, as if testing how it felt. She stood from the bench and walked back toward the palace. At the doorway, she paused and looked back. "The flowers you planted," she said. "What are they called?" "They are from Earth. We call them forget-me-nots." He touched one of the small blue blooms. "They mean remembrance, memory, holding on to what matters, even when everything else changes." Velith studied him for a moment, this strange, quiet man who planted memories in her garden and absorbed hatred without breaking. "Good night, Do-hyun." "Good night, Velith." She returned to her chambers, but sleep did not come for a long time. Her thoughts were too full of questions. And her markings, despite her best efforts, kept shifting to soft gold. A diplomatic summit had been called on a neutral station. Representatives from 12 species gathered to discuss trade agreements, border disputes, and the fragile peace between the Sarani Empire and humanity. For the first time, Velith would appear publicly with Do-hyun as her husband. She was terrified, not of the politics. She had handled politics her entire life. She was terrified of how others would see her, a Sarani princess standing beside a human, legitimizing their union, making it real. Do-hyun seemed to sense her anxiety. On the transport to the station, he sat quietly beside her, reading a Sarani poetry collection. He did not try to comfort her with words. He simply stayed close, a calm presence. "You are not nervous," Velith observed. "I am very nervous," he replied without looking up from his book. "I have simply learned to hide it. Decades of practice." "You hide it well." "Survival skill." He turned a page. "In my former profession, showing fear could get you killed. So you learn to put it away, deep inside where no one can see it." Velith studied him. In the months since their late-night conversation, they had shared many dinners. She had learned more about this strange human, his love of poetry, his talent for cooking, his gentle humor that emerged only when he felt safe. She had begun to enjoy his company, but she still did not fully know him. Parts of Do-hyun remained locked away, hidden behind walls built from years of pain and training. The summit was exhausting. 12 species meant 12 different protocols, 12 different ways to give offense, 12 different agendas. Velith navigated it with practiced skill, smiling and speaking the careful words of diplomacy. Do-hyun surprised her. She had expected him to stand silently at her side, the quiet human husband. Instead, he engaged. He asked thoughtful questions. He remembered names and details from previous conversations. He complimented artwork and commented on architecture with genuine knowledge. When she stumbled over a complex trade question, he leaned close and whispered a suggestion, an elegant compromise she had not considered. She presented it as her own idea. The other delegates accepted it immediately. Afterwards, in a quiet moment between sessions, she confronted him. "You knew the answer to that trade question." "I had some thoughts," he admitted. "You made me look brilliant." "You are brilliant. I simply provided information you lacked." He shrugged. "This summit is about your empire's interests. You should appear strong and capable. I am just your husband." Velith shook her head. "You are much more than that, and we both know it." Do-hyun smiled, but said nothing. The real test came on the third day. A Kreth ambassador named Vorek had been watching them throughout the summit. The Kreth were a warrior species allied with the Sorani, massive beings covered in armored scales, proud of their strength and battle prowess. Vorek had fought against humans in the war and clearly despised them. During a formal dinner, Vorek rose from his seat and addressed the room. "I wish to propose a demonstration," he announced, his deep voice carrying across the hall. "A test of species honor. I challenge any human present to face me in ritual combat." The room went silent. All eyes turned to Do-hyun. Velith felt her markings flash red, alarm, anger. She started to rise, to defend her husband, but Do-hyun's hand gently touched her arm. "I am honored by the challenge, Ambassador," Do-hyun said calmly, "but I must decline. I am a diplomat now, not a warrior. Combat is no longer my path." Vorek laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "As I suspected. Humans are cowards who hide behind their numbers and their weapons. Without their armies, they are nothing." Do-hyun's expression did not change. "You may be right, Ambassador. I am certainly nothing impressive." "Then admit your species is inferior. Bow to me and acknowledge Kreth's superiority." The room held its breath. This was a deliberate humiliation, designed to damage human standing in the galactic community. Do-hyun stood slowly. Velith's heart pounded. What was he doing? He walked toward Vorek until they stood face to face, the massive Kreth warrior towering over the quiet human. Then Do-hyun smiled. "I acknowledge that you are much larger than me, Ambassador, and stronger, and probably faster." He spread his hands. "In physical combat, you would almost certainly defeat me. But I wonder, is that the only measure of worth? Is strength all that matters?" "Strength is everything," Vorek growled. "Then I feel sorry for you." Do-hyun's voice was soft, almost kind. "Because there are so many other beautiful things in the universe. Poetry, music, gardens that grow slowly over seasons, love that builds over years. None of these require strength, only patience and care." Vorek snarled and grabbed Do-hyun by the collar, lifting him off the floor. "You mock me?" "I pity you," Do-hyun replied, still calm despite hanging in the Kreth's grip. "You have only one way to prove your worth. I have dozens." Vorek threw him across the room. Do-hyun hit a decorative pillar hard. The delegates gasped. Velith screamed and ran toward him. But Do-hyun was already rising. He moved differently now, fluid, controlled, his earlier softness gone. His eyes had changed, becoming focused and cold. Vorak charged at him with claws extended. What happened next took exactly 3 seconds. Do-hyun stepped to the side at the last moment, using Vorak's momentum against him. His hand struck 3 specific points on the Kreth's neck and shoulder. Pressure points, Veleth realized later, studying the security footage. Vorak's arm went limp. Do-hyun spun, planted his foot, and used leverage to send the massive warrior crashing to the floor. Before Vorak could recover, Do-hyun was beside him, one hand positioned at the Kreth's throat. "I could kill you now," Do-hyun said quietly. "Your scales mean nothing. Your strength means nothing. You are vulnerable in 17 places I can reach from here." His voice was ice. "But I will not, because unlike you, I have other ways to prove my worth." He released Vorak and stepped back. Then he offered his hand to help the Kreth rise. Vorak stared at the hand in disbelief. "You defeated me. You should finish it. That is the warrior's way." "Perhaps." Do-hyun's cold expression softened slightly. "But I am not a warrior anymore. I am a gardener, and gardeners do not destroy. We help things grow." He kept his hand extended. "Even wounded pride can heal, Ambassador, if you let it." Slowly, uncertainly, Vorak took the offered hand and rose. The room was silent. Later that night, Veleth watched the security footage of the fight over and over. 3 seconds. Vorak was a decorated warrior who had killed hundreds. Do-hyun had disabled him in 3 seconds without causing permanent harm. His movements were not angry or brutal. They were precise, efficient, almost gentle. He used exactly enough force and not a single bit more. When Do-hyun entered her chambers, she was waiting. "What were you before you were my husband?" she asked again. "The truth this time, all of it." Do-hyun sat heavily in a chair. He suddenly looked tired, years older than his age. "I was the reason your empire agreed to peace," he said quietly. "The generals did not want to stop fighting. They believed they could still win. But they knew that if the war continued, they would have to face me again. And they remembered what happened the last time." Veleth felt her markings shift through a dozen colors. "Show me," she said. "Show me what you did." Do-hyun was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Tomorrow, I will tell you everything. But Veleth..." He looked at her with those sad, dark eyes. "When you know the truth, you may wish you had never asked. I am not a good man. I have done terrible things." Veleth moved closer. She took his scarred hands in hers, the first time she had touched him willingly since their wedding ceremony. "Tell me anyway," she said. "I need to understand who you really are." Do-hyun looked at their joined hands. His expression was unreadable. "Very well," he said softly. "Tomorrow you will meet the ghost." They sat in her private chambers, away from listening devices and palace servants. Do-hyun had spent an hour checking for surveillance equipment, his hands moving with practiced efficiency, finding 3 hidden recorders that even Veleth had not known about. "Old habits," he explained quietly. "Shall I begin?" Veleth nodded, her markings already shifting with nervous anticipation. Do-hyun closed his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was distant, as if he was reading from a book written long ago. "When the war started, humanity was losing. Badly. Your empire had better weapons, better ships, more soldiers. We were fighting a defensive war, dying by the millions, watching our colonies burn." He opened his eyes. "The generals decided they needed a different kind of soldier. People who could do impossible things, who could slip through enemy lines and break the empire from within. Special forces," Veleth said. "We had intelligence about human infiltration units. My unit was called Ghost Division. There were 12 of us originally. We were trained for years before our first mission, Languages, psychology, technology, combat, everything needed to survive alone behind enemy lines for months at a time. What did you do? Do-hyun's expression grew heavy. At first, we destroyed things. Supply depots, communication relays, shipyards. We would appear from nowhere, complete our mission, and vanish before anyone could respond. The Serani started calling us ghosts because they could never find us. Velith remembered the reports from that time. Mysterious attacks that made no sense, vital infrastructure destroyed without warning, paranoia spreading through the military as soldiers began seeing human infiltrators everywhere. But destruction was not enough, Do-hyun continued. Your empire was too large, too powerful. We needed to break something more fundamental than supply lines. What? Trust. He met her eyes. The Serani Empire is a coalition of 7 species held together by shared interest and political marriages, like ours. But under the surface there were tensions, old grudges, competing ambitions. We found those cracks and made them wider. Velith felt cold. How? My most famous operation was at the Proxima Command Station. I infiltrated the facility alone, spent 2 weeks gathering intelligence while pretending to be a maintenance worker. I discovered that 3 Serani admirals were deliberately sending allied species troops into impossible battles, using them as shields while preserving Serani forces. That cannot be true. Our military would never. I have the recordings. Do-hyun's voice was gentle but firm. Communications between the admirals, supply records, battle plans. They were sacrificing Kreth, Lorath, and Venthari soldiers by the thousands to protect Serani core worlds. Velith felt sick. Her markings flashed gray, then red, then settled into an angry orange. Instead of destroying the station, I broadcast everything. Every recording, every document, every secret communication, across every frequency, in every language. The entire coalition saw the truth at the same moment. Velith remembered what happened next. She had been young, but the political crisis was impossible to ignore. Riots on allied worlds. 3 admirals executed for treason. The Venthari delegation nearly withdrew from the coalition entirely. You almost destroyed us, she whispered. Yes. Do-hyun did not look away from her. That was the point. If I had simply bombed the station, your empire would have recovered. But I broke something that could not be easily repaired. Faith. Trust between species. The belief that the coalition was fighting together for shared goals. How many died because of what you did? In the immediate aftermath, perhaps 10,000 across various species in the riots and political violence. His voice was heavy. Indirectly, over the following years? I do not know. The war continued for 8 more years. Every death in that time. I cannot say how many would have happened anyway, and how many were caused by my actions. Velith stood abruptly, walking to the window. Her reflection showed markings cycling through colors faster than she could control. You speak of gardening and peace, she said bitterly. You lecture Kreth ambassadors about better ways to prove worth, but you are a mass murderer. You killed thousands. Yes. How do you live with yourself? Do-hyun was quiet for a long moment. When Velith turned back to face him, she saw tears running silently down his weathered cheeks. I do not, he said softly. Not really. Every night I see their faces. The soldiers I killed directly. I remember each one. The thousands who died because of operations I planned. I carry them too. They never leave me. Then why did you do it? Because my people were dying. His voice cracked slightly. Because every day the war continued, human cities burned, and human children became orphans. Because I believed, I still believe, that ending the war faster would save more lives than it cost. He wiped his face with scarred hands. Maybe I was wrong. I have wondered about that every day for 15 years. But at the time, It felt like the only choice. Velith stared at this broken man, this ghost who had haunted her empire's nightmares, now sitting in her chambers weeping over the weight of his choices. "Why tell me this?" she asked. "I could have you arrested, executed." "Because you asked for the truth." Do-hyun looked up at her. "And because I am tired of hiding. If you want to hate me, you have every right. If you want me dead, I will not resist. I volunteered for this marriage hoping to build something better, but I cannot build on lies. You needed to know what I am." Velith sat down slowly, her mind racing. She thought about her brother Vorath, who had never fought in a war but spoke constantly of Sarani superiority. She thought about Commander Raylos, who had built his career on human casualties and now opposed the peace at every turn. She thought about the admirals who had sacrificed Allied soldiers to protect Sarani interests. Then she thought about Do-hyun, who had done terrible things in a terrible war, and now wept openly because he could not forget them. "You could have destroyed us completely," she said slowly. "At Proxima. You had enough information to bring down a dozen noble houses, to shatter the coalition entirely. Why did you only release enough to cause a crisis?" Do-hyun wiped his eyes. Because complete destruction would have meant generations of chaos. Billions of deaths across dozens of worlds as the coalition collapsed and every species turned on each other. Warlords, civil wars, famines. He shook his head. Victory was never the goal. Peace was the goal. I needed to weaken your empire enough that they would consider negotiation, not destroy it so thoroughly that peace became impossible. You were fighting a war while already planning for peace. Always. He met her eyes. Every operation I planned, I asked myself, does this bring peace closer or push it further away? Sometimes I made wrong choices. Sometimes I killed people who did not need to die. Those mistakes haunt me most. Velith studied him for a long time. Her markings had finally settled. Not gold, not gray, but something in between. Something complicated. "You are not a good man," she said finally. "You have done terrible things. Yes. But you are not a monster either. Monsters do not weep. Monsters do not plant gardens to remind themselves that building is possible." Do-hyun said nothing. Velith reached across the space between them and took his hand. "I do not forgive you. I am not sure I ever can. But I understand. War makes impossible choices, and you made them while trying to preserve something beyond victory." Do-hyun's scarred fingers tightened around hers. "What happens now?" Velith considered the question. She thought about politics and peace, about her family and her empire, about this complicated man who was both killer and gardener, ghost and husband. "Now," she said slowly, "we have dinner, and tomorrow we continue building, because that is what survivors do." For the first time since beginning his story, Do-hyun smiled. "Thank you, Velith. Do not thank me yet." She stood, still holding his hand. "You have many years of gardening ahead before you balance your scales, and I intend to watch every moment." "I would expect nothing less." They walked together toward the dining hall, hand in hand, a princess and a ghost, learning slowly how to live with the weight of history. Behind them, through the window, the forget-me-nots swayed gently in the evening breeze. The realization surprised her. She had expected duty, tolerance, perhaps grudging respect. She had not expected to look forward to breakfast with her husband, to miss him when diplomatic duties separated them, to feel her markings shift to gold whenever he entered a room. They had developed routines. Morning tea in the garden, where Do-hyun would report on his plants and Velith would pretend to be less interested than she was. Evening walks through the palace grounds, talking about everything and nothing. Nights reading together in comfortable silence. It was not passion. It was something quieter, a steady warmth that had grown so slowly she almost missed it happening. Do-hyun had changed, too. He smiled more easily now. The nightmares still came, but less often. When Velith woke to his screaming, she would sit with him until the shaking stopped, and he would hold her hand like it was the only solid thing in the universe. "We have become something unexpected," Velith said one morning, watching him tend the forget-me-nots. Do-hyun looked up, dirt on his weathered hands. "What is that?" "A real marriage." She felt her markings shift to soft gold. "I do not know when it happened." He stood slowly, crossing the garden to stand before her. "Are you unhappy about this?" "No." She touched his face gently. "I am terrified. I have never had something precious to lose before." Do-hyun smiled, that small, genuine smile she had learned to treasure. "Then we are both terrified together." The peace shattered 3 days later. Velith was in council chambers when the news arrived. A human colony called New Horizon had been destroyed. 50,000 dead. The attack signatures matched Sorani military weapons. "This is impossible," Velith said, staring at the reports. "We have no forces in that sector. The peace treaty—" "The peace treaty is dead," Commander Raylos interrupted. He was smiling, actually smiling at news of 50,000 deaths. "Rogue Sorani forces have apparently taken matters into their own hands. Regrettable, of course, but understandable given human provocations." "What provocations?" Velith demanded. "Does it matter?" Prince Vorath stepped forward, his eyes cold. "The humans will retaliate. War will resume. It is inevitable now." Velith looked between her brother and the commander. Something felt wrong. They were too prepared, too calm, as if they had been waiting for this. She found Do-hyun in their chambers, speaking urgently with a holographic image of Admiral Yun Tai-sung. The human admiral's face was grim. "Preparing the fleet now. High Command wants blood, Do-hyun. I cannot hold them back much longer." "Give me time," Do-hyun said. "Something about this attack does not fit. The weapons signatures are too clean, too obvious. If Sorani forces wanted to restart the war, they would be more subtle. You have 48 hours. After that, we launch." The Admiral's image flickered. "I am sorry, old friend. I know what this means for you." The transmission ended. Do-hyun stood motionless, his back to Velith. "You believe this was a false flag attack," she said. "I know it was." He turned to face her. His expression had changed. The gentle husband replaced by something harder, sharper. The ghost, surfacing after years of dormancy. "The question is who benefits. Raylos has always opposed the peace. He built his career on the war." "And your brother?" Velith hesitated. Vorath had resented her since childhood, the third daughter who somehow commanded more respect than the firstborn son. He had called her a traitor for marrying a human, had whispered against her in court. "He would not murder 50,000 people just to hurt me," she said, but her voice wavered. "Perhaps not just to hurt you." Do-hyun moved to his personal console, fingers flying over the interface. "But to restore his own position? To become a war hero instead of the prince who watched his sister make peace with the enemy?" Files appeared on the screen. Financial records, communication logs, military requisitions. Velith did not ask how Do-hyun had obtained them. "There," he said softly. 3 months ago, a significant transfer of credits from Relos to a private military contractor. And here, communications between that contractor and a known arms dealer in the neutral zones. This is not proof. No, but it is a trail." Do-hyun turned to face her. "I need to follow it. If I can prove this attack was staged, the peace might survive." Velith felt cold dread settling in her stomach. "If you start investigating, they will know. Vorath has spies everywhere. Raylos commands entire fleets." "I know." "They could have you killed. They could try. that hard edge in his voice again, the ghost speaking through her husband's lips. But they do not know what I am capable of. They see an old gardener. They have forgotten what I used to be. Veleth grabbed his arm. Do-hyun, please. Let me handle this through political channels. I can speak to my mother, demand an investigation. Your mother is constrained by politics. She cannot move openly without evidence. He covered her hand with his. I can move through shadows. It is what I was trained for. And if they catch you, then you will be a widow, and the peace will likely die with me. His dark eyes softened. But if I do nothing, the peace dies anyway, and another generation bleeds for the ambitions of small men. Veleth felt tears threatening. Her markings flashed through a dozen colors: fear, anger, love, desperation. I cannot lose you, she whispered. Not now. Not when I finally... She could not finish the sentence, but Do-hyun understood. He always understood. I know, he said softly. I feel the same. This year with you has been the first happiness I have known since my wife died. He touched her face gently. That is why I must do this. Not just for peace, but for us. For the life we are building. Before Veleth could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the palace. Alert! Security breach in the royal quarters. All guards to stations. The door burst open. Commander Raylos strode in, flanked by armed soldiers. Kang Do-hyun, Raylos announced, his voice dripping with satisfaction. You are under arrest for espionage against the Sorani Empire. Evidence has been found linking you to the New Horizon attack. That is a lie, Veleth snapped. He has been here all day. I am his witness. With respect, Princess, your testimony is compromised by your attachment to the prisoner. Raylos gestured, and soldiers moved toward Do-hyun. He will be detained pending investigation. A formality, I assure you. Veleth saw her husband's body shift, that subtle change in posture she had witnessed once before, when he disabled the Kreth ambassador in 3 seconds. Do not, she said quickly. Do-hyun, please. He met her eyes. For a moment, she saw the ghost calculating angles and probabilities, counting soldiers and weapons, planning an escape route through violence. Then the ghost retreated, and her husband returned. Very well, Do-hyun said quietly. He offered his wrists for binding. I will go peacefully. A wise choice. Raylos could not hide his smile. Take him to the detention shuttle. He will be held on prison station Keth until his execution, his trial. As soldiers led him away, Do-hyun looked back at Veleth one last time. The flowers need watering, he said. Do not forget them while I am gone. Then he was gone, and Veleth stood alone in their chambers, her markings burning red with helpless rage. Vorath appeared in the doorway, wearing an expression of false sympathy. I am sorry, sister. It seems your human was not what he appeared. Get out, Veleth said, her voice shaking. Perhaps now you will see that peace with humans was always a fantasy. They are liars and killers, nothing more. Get out! Vorath smiled and withdrew. Behind him, 2 guards took position outside her door. She was not just grieving. She was a prisoner in her own palace. Through the window, Veleth watched the detention shuttle lift off, carrying her husband toward imprisonment and death. Her markings settled into something she had never felt before. Not gold, not gray, not red. They turned white-hot, the color of fury barely contained. If they thought she would sit quietly while they murdered her husband and destroyed everything they had built together, they had badly underestimated her. The war they wanted so badly was about to find them, but not in the way they expected. Prison Station Keth hung in the darkness between stars. A fortress designed to hold the Empire's most dangerous criminals. 3,000 elite soldiers guarded its corridors. Escape was considered impossible. They had never held the ghost of Proxima before. Do-hyun sat in his cell, counting time by his heartbeats. He had been here for 62 hours. His execution was scheduled in 12 more. They were not even pretending to hold a trial. The guards thought he was an old man, broken by despair. They saw him sitting motionless, staring at the wall. They did not see the calculations running behind his eyes. 13 guards on this level, 4 security checkpoints between his cell and the communication array. The station's layout matched standard Imperial design. He had memorized those blueprints years ago. Atmospheric controls were on level 7. The power core was on level 12. When the dinner shift came and the guards were distracted, Do-hyun moved. The cell door's electronic lock was sophisticated, but Do-hyun had spent 6 hours studying the guard who checked on him. The man favored his right leg. Old injury, probably. He carried his access card in his left pocket instead of the standard right. When he leaned to slide the food tray through, he exposed his neck for exactly 2 seconds. Do-hyun was through the door before the guard hit the floor. Not dead. A careful strike to a nerve cluster that would leave him unconscious for an hour with no permanent damage. The ghost had returned. He moved through the station like water, like shadow. Guards who saw him were disabled before they could raise alarms. Security cameras found their feeds mysteriously corrupted. Doors that should have been locked opened silently under his hands. 15 years of peace had not dulled his skills. If anything, the years of meditation and gardening had given him something he lacked before. Perfect calm. No anger, no hatred, just efficiency and purpose. The communication array was on level 4. Do-hyun reached it in 23 minutes, leaving 11 unconscious guards behind him. None were dead. Even now, even fighting for his life, he held back. The array was heavily encrypted, but Do-hyun had spent decades learning Sorani systems. Within minutes, he had access to the station's communication logs, security recordings, and data archives. He found what he was looking for. Commander Relos had been careless, or perhaps simply arrogant, assuming no one would ever examine the station's records. Hidden in the encrypted military frequencies were communications between Relos and Prince Vorath, dating back 6 months, planning the false flag attack, coordinating the evidence against Do-hyun, scheduling the timing to maximum political effect. There was more. Financial records showing payments to mercenaries. Ship manifests proving Relos had diverted military vessels to attack New Horizon while disguising them as rogue forces. Even a recording of Vorath laughing about how easy it had been to fool his mother and sister. Do-hyun copied everything. Then he began broadcasting. The signal went out on every frequency: civilian, military, diplomatic. Across the Sorani Empire and beyond, screens lit up with evidence of the conspiracy. Admirals watching battle preparations suddenly saw their commanders' crimes. Diplomats negotiating war terms found themselves reading proof of manufactured atrocities. The galaxy learned the truth. But Do-hyun was not finished. He opened a direct channel to Admiral Yun Tai-sung's fleet, still holding position at the border. "Tai-sung, do not attack. The evidence is broadcasting now. The war was manufactured." The Admiral's face appeared on screen, eyes wide with shock. "Do-hyun? How are you? Where are you calling from?" "Prison Station Keth. I will explain later. Call off the attack. Give the Sorani time to respond to the broadcast." Yes. Yes, I will try." Tai-sung shook his head. "You impossible old man. Only you could escape an Imperial prison and stop a war at the same time. I am not escaped yet. I need to—" Alarms exploded throughout the station. Red lights flashed. A voice boomed over intercoms. "Security breach at the communication array. All units respond. The human prisoner has escaped. Authorization to use lethal force." "Go," Tai-sung said. "I will handle things on this end. Just survive." The transmission ended. Do-hyun was alone. He had expected immediate response. What he had not expected was the scope of it. Commander Raylos's personal legion was stationed on this very prison station, 3,000 soldiers, the most elite forces in the Empire, loyal to their commander above all else. They did not care about the broadcast. They did not care about evidence. They had been ordered to kill the human, and they would obey. Du Hyun smiled grimly. 3,000 soldiers, one old gardener. The Battle of Prison Station Keth would become legend. Do Hyun did not fight 3,000 soldiers directly. That would have been suicide. Instead, he fought the station itself. He knew Imperial design. He knew the vulnerabilities. First, he disabled the main power core, plunging entire sections into darkness. Soldiers trained for combat in well-lit corridors found themselves stumbling through blackness while Do Hyun moved freely, his memory of the layout perfect. Second, he seized control of the atmospheric systems, not to kill. He vented sections to unconsciousness levels, not lethal vacuum. Soldiers collapsed where they stood, alive but neutralized. Third, he turned their communications against them. False orders sent squads running in wrong directions. Fake reports created chaos and confusion. The Legion's coordination collapsed as units began responding to phantom threats. Through it all, Do Hyun moved like a shadow. When soldiers found him, he fought, but always with precision, always with restraint. He broke bones that would heal. He struck nerve clusters that caused temporary paralysis. He left men unconscious rather than dead. It took 5 hours. When Admiral Yun Tai-sung's rescue fleet finally arrived at the station, they found something impossible. Commander Raylos's elite legion, 3,000 of the Empire's finest soldiers, had been shattered. 600 were captured, locked in their own cells. The rest had fled on escape shuttles, their will to fight completely broken. Casualty count, 17 dead, all in direct combat, all unavoidable. Every other soldier had been disabled with non-lethal methods, 17 deaths out of 3,000 enemies. Any other human would have painted the station red with blood. Do Hyun had dismantled an army while trying to spare as many lives as possible. Admiral Tae-sung found him on the station's observation deck, sitting quietly, watching the stars. His clothes were torn, his knuckles were bleeding, but his eyes were calm. "You did it," Tae-sung said softly. "You actually did it." The broadcast reached everyone? Everywhere. The Sorani High Command is in chaos. Raylos's supporters are being arrested. Prince Vorath has fled. We do not know where yet. The Admiral shook his head. "The war is over, Do Hyun. Again. Because of you. Again." Do Hyun did not smile. 17 dead. I tried to avoid it, but 17 men died because they stood between me and that communication array. 17. Out of 3,000. Tae-sung knelt beside his old friend. Anyone else would have killed hundreds, thousands. Anyone else is not me. Do Hyun finally looked away from the stars. "I am tired, Tae-sung. I thought I was finished with this. I thought I could be a gardener now." "You are a gardener, one who happens to be able to destroy legions when necessary." Tae-sung offered his hand. "Come, let us get you home to your wife." Do Hyun took the hand and rose. His body ached in 100 places. His heart was heavy with the weight of 17 new ghosts. But somewhere across the stars, Velith was waiting. Their gardens were growing. And the peace, the fragile, precious peace they had built together, had survived. "Home," he said quietly. "Yes, I would like that very much." Behind them, through the observation windows, the first Sorani diplomatic shuttles were already approaching. The peace that Vorath and Raylos had tried to destroy was about to be reborn. And across the galaxy, beings of a dozen species watched security footage of an old human dismantling an army without becoming a monster. The ghost of Proxima had returned. But this time, he had chosen mercy. The throne room of the Sorani Empire had never been so quiet. Empress Ilara sat upon the ancient seat of power, her silver skin pale, her bioluminescent markings shifting through colors that betrayed her exhaustion. The past week had been the hardest of her reign. Her son had betrayed her. Her military had nearly plunged the galaxy back into war. Everything she had built stood on the edge of collapse, and now, standing before her, was the human who had single-handedly prevented that collapse. Kang Do-hyun looked nothing like a legend. He wore simple clothing, borrowed from the rescue fleet. His face was bruised, his hands were bandaged. He stood quietly, without pride or defiance, waiting for judgment. Velith stood beside him, her markings burning gold despite her attempts to control them. She had arrived hours ago, freed from palace confinement the moment Raylos's soldiers abandoned their posts. She had not left Do-hyun's side since. "You understand," Empress Ilara said slowly, "that under our law, you should be executed." "I understand, Empress. You killed 17 Sorani soldiers, elite warriors from noble families. Their houses demand justice." "They do," Do-hyun did not argue. "Those men were following orders. They did not know their commander was a traitor. They died because I chose to survive. I accept responsibility for their deaths." The assembled nobles shifted uncomfortably. This was not how prisoners spoke. There was no begging, no excuses, no attempts to shift blame. "However," Ilara continued, "I have reviewed the security footage from Prison Station Keth. All of it." She gestured, and holographic images appeared above the throne room floor. Footage of Do-hyun moving through the station. Footage of fights where he could have killed but chose to disable. Footage of unconscious soldiers carefully positioned so they would not be trampled by their fleeing comrades. 17 deaths, the Empress said, out of 3,000 soldiers. My military advisors tell me that any other scenario, any assault force, any rescue attempt would have resulted in hundreds or thousands of casualties. She paused. You dismantled an entire legion while actively trying to spare as many lives as possible. I tried, Do-hyun said quietly. 17 times I failed. 17 times. You had no choice. Ilara stood from her throne, a gesture that made the nobles gasp. Empresses did not stand for prisoners. Every death on that station was in direct combat. Every soldier who faced you was given a chance to surrender first. You used non-lethal methods whenever possible, even when lethal force would have been faster and safer for you. She descended the steps toward Do-hyun. Velith tensed, ready to defend her husband, but the Empress's markings showed no hostility, only something like wonder. I have lived for 200 years, Ilara said. I have seen wars and treaties, heroes and villains. Never have I seen someone fight so hard to preserve life while destroying an army. She stopped directly before Do-hyun. They were the same height, his human frame matching her Sorani stature. Why? She asked. You had evidence to destroy my entire government. You could have broadcast information that would have shattered a dozen noble houses, triggered civil war, ended the Sorani Empire forever. You had more than enough justification after what my son did to you. Do-hyun met her eyes. Because peace requires trust, Empress. I exposed only what was necessary to stop the war. Everything else, every secret I uncovered, every corruption I found, your people deserve the chance to fix those problems themselves, without a human burning everything down. You showed mercy to an empire that imprisoned you and tried to kill you. I showed mercy to billions of innocent beings who had nothing to do with your son's ambitions. Do-hyun's voice remained steady. War does not punish the guilty. It kills the innocent. Children who never chose sides. Families who only want to live in peace. If I had destroyed your empire, they would have suffered most. Ilara was silent for a long moment. The throne room held its breath. Then, slowly, the Empress of the Sorani bowed, not a small nod of acknowledgement. A full bow, deep and respectful, the kind reserved for great heroes and honored allies. The nobles erupted in shocked murmurs. This was unprecedented. An empress bowing to a human, to a prisoner accused of killing Sarani soldiers. "I pardon you," Ilara said, straightening. "Not because the law demands it, but because justice does. You have proven something I did not believe possible, that strength and mercy can exist together. That victory does not require destruction." She turned to address the assembled nobles. "Let the record show that Kang Do-hyun acted in defense of peace. His actions exposed traitors who would have plunged us back into war for personal gain. The 17 soldiers who died fell in honorable combat against an honorable enemy." Her voice hardened. "And let the record show that Commander Ralos has been executed for treason. Prince Vorath has been stripped of all titles and banished from the Empire. Any who supported their conspiracy will face imperial justice." She looked back at Do-hyun. "You came to us as a sacrifice, an unwanted groom in a political marriage. You will leave this room as something else entirely. A hero, a symbol of what peace can build." Velith finally stepped forward, unable to contain herself any longer. "Mother, I request permission to speak." Ilara nodded. "This man is my husband," Velith said, her voice ringing through the chamber. "I did not choose him. I did not want him. I expected a beast, and I received a gardener." Her markings glowed gold, bright and undeniable. "But over this year, I have watched him earn respect through patience rather than force. I have watched him absorb hatred without breaking. I have watched him save an empire while trying to spare even his enemies from harm." She took Do-hyun's bandaged hand in hers. "I love him, not because politics requires it, not because treaties demand it, because he has shown me that humanity is not what we believed. They are capable of terrible things, but they are also capable of choosing better." Do-hyun's weathered face softened. His dark eyes glistened. "Velith," he said softly. "Do not speak," she interrupted. "You have done enough talking. Now you will let me take you home, where you will rest and heal and tend your gardens." Her markings flickered with fierce determination. "That is an order from your wife." For the first time since the nightmare began, Do-hyun smiled, that small, genuine smile that Velith had learned to treasure. "Yes, dear," he said. The throne room, against all protocol, erupted in laughter. 5 years later, the gardens had grown beyond recognition. What had started as a small corner of the palace grounds now spread across entire acres. Species of plants from a dozen worlds grew side by side, Sarani flowers next to earth roses, Kreth climbing vines tangled with Lorath hanging ferns. It had become a symbol, people said, a living metaphor for what peace could build. Do-hyun knelt in the dirt, his hands gentle as always, showing a small child how to plant seeds. The child was not human or Sarani. She was Venthari, a species orphaned by the war on both sides, her family killed in one of the final battles before peace. Do-hyun and Velith had adopted her 3 years ago. They had named her Su'a, which meant water in Korean. Like water, she brought life wherever she flowed. "Press gently," Do-hyun instructed. "The seed knows what to do. We just give it a safe place to grow." Su'a, 4 years old, covered in dirt, radiantly happy, patted the soil carefully. "Will it grow fast, Father?" "No. Growth is slow, but that is good." Do-hyun smiled at her. "The best things take time. Flowers, friendships, families." Velith watched from the garden path, her markings glowing soft gold, always gold now whenever she saw her husband and daughter together. She had never imagined this life. A human husband, an adopted child, happiness built from the ruins of war. "What are you teaching her?" Velith called out. Do-hyun looked up and his smile widened at the sight of her. Even after 5 years, that smile made her heart skip. The most powerful thing in the universe, he said. Patience and love. And the choice to build instead of break. Veleth walked into the garden to join them. Su'a immediately reached up with dirty hands, wanting to be held. Veleth lifted her without hesitation. Some things were more important than clean clothing. "The diplomatic delegation arrives tomorrow," Veleth said. "The Kreth want to discuss expanding the trade agreements." "I know." Do-hyun stood slowly, brushing dirt from his knees. "Ambassador Vorek specifically requested to visit the gardens." "Vorek?" Veleth raised an eyebrow. "The same Vorek who called you a coward?" "The same. Apparently he has taken up gardening himself. He says it helps with his anger." Do-hyun's smile turned wry. "He wants advice on growing earth flowers on his home world." Veleth laughed. The universe was full of surprises. "Father," Su'a said, tugging at Do-hyun's sleeve, "will the seed really grow into a flower?" "Yes, little one, if we take care of it." "And it will be beautiful?" "The most beautiful." He touched her face gently. "Just like you?" Su'a giggled and buried her face in Veleth's shoulder. The three of them stood together in the garden, Human, Sarani, and Venthari, as the sun set over a world at peace. Behind them, the forget-me-nots swayed in the evening breeze, their blue petals bright against the fading light. Some marriages were made for politics, some for power, some for peace. But the best marriages, Do-hyun had learned, were made for love. And love, like gardens, grew strongest when you gave it patience, care, and the courage to build instead of break. The ghost of Proxima had finally found his home. And across the galaxy, beings of a dozen species told stories of the old human gardener who had shattered legions, saved empires, and proven that the strongest weapon in the universe was not violence. It was mercy.